that is the biggest kind of stop and go that they have to accomplish to really be like, let's push it. Like, I almost envision it as like a little like enforcer, right? To let all these eggs grow, all these follicles grow with the FSH, with the LH. And then after a few days, when they kind of see, okay, they're growing well, they have to give you this other medication to be like, okay, grow, but don't grow too much or too quickly, because they don't want, ovulation to occur, and they don't want to lose any of these eggs preemptively, because they want to be able to retrieve all of them in the egg retrieval surgery. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Very Beginning. Happy you're diving in today. I hope you're doing well. Here in London, it's horrible, gloomy, grey weather. I hope it's a bit better wherever you are. I really can't wait for the spring to finally come, for weather to get better. It's like this time of year where it's just so grey and cold, and I don't know about you, but it does always impact my mood. So I hope that soon it will get a bit warmer and sunnier here. But until then, we'll just make ourselves some happy, sunny thoughts. Talking about all things fertility. So today I wanted to go or continue the little IVF series that I currently have within my fertility bucket. And today it's really kind of going into the nitty-gritty, like the really step-by-step process. If you haven't listened to the previous episodes, I would suggest you start there to really kind of understand or listen to the episodes that I have about like kind of the considerations I would suggest you have before going into the IVF process, key questions to ask yourselves, kind of all these pre-work. But today is really more for the people who know they want to proceed with either, kind of fertility investigations, fertility treatments, egg retrievals. It's also relevant to you because the stimulation process of IVF is really the same as with the egg retrieval, because I really wanted to make sure I give you, kind of my personal experience. So when you do go into that first appointment at your fertility clinic, that you feel a bit more prepared about what's going to happen, what they're going to ask of you, what tests they're going to do. And of course, disclaimer as always, that's my experience. I'm not a medical professional, not a doctor. Your clinic might do it differently, but I still found it helpful myself to watch similar podcasts or videos before I went in. So just wanted to contribute my part to hopefully help you. Before we jump in, I wanted to share with you one little thing that I put together, a little, or maybe not so little, 3-page long PDF with 25 questions that I had prepared back then before I was going into my first appointment with the fertility clinic, based on kind of all the research that I did. And those who know me, or maybe you've gotten to know me a little bit through these episodes, know I'm a bit of a research fanatic. So I thought it might be helpful just to share that with you, since I had it on my iPhone in my notes. So I thought, let me just quickly copy that and give it to you as like a free downloadable. So instead, I don't want to be sitting here kind of reading 25 questions to you. So I pop them all nicely in a PDF for you, like a little checklist that you can print and, kind of check or use as a digital file on your phone. And the questions are super in depth. So maybe you don't see the need to ask all of them in your fertility appointment, but, maybe, some of them are helpful to you, and they're really wide. So they range from kind of logistical things about how do I, communicate with the clinic and schedule appointments, or where will my egg retrieval surgery take place and who will perform it, to really kind of more medical questions about, what protocol of medicine do you usually use at your clinic, and how will that be customized to me? Or do you suggest, in our case, we do ICSI or IVF? So all these questions that I just found super, super helpful to ask up front. And also here, really a recommendation from me: don't be afraid to ask so many questions. Like, I think my doctor was really patient, and our first appointment was supposed to be like an hour and it went 2, and he didn't charge me extra. And I know that's not normal, and maybe, not every fertility clinic is like that. But I think it's still really important to not feel bad, about as a patient coming with a bunch of questions, because I really think at the end of the day, it's your right to ask questions. It's your right to be informed. It's your right to ask your doctor to explain everything to you, and maybe, you need a follow-up appointment, and that's okay. Or maybe you ask it at your next appointment that's already included in the package that you're paying for. But just want to, kind of give you that little advice to not think like, oh, my doctor will be annoyed of me if I ask too many questions, because I really think there is not such a thing as too many questions. You're signing up for, a lot and you're paying a lot. So it's really, really your right to be informed. So yeah, that little PDF, I'll link it in my Instagram bio on my channel if you don't follow me, Very Beginning Official. And then I'll also put it, of course, in the description box of this episode for you to quickly download. All right, so jumping into the main takeaways or like the main step-by-step advice that I can give you. So let's say you decided that you want to proceed with IVF or with an egg retrieval, fertility treatment, whatever that is. So you come to your first appointment, right? And what happens? Well, first of all, I think important to consider that even if, let's say, you're going to do IVF, that first appointment is usually not included in the cost of the entire package. So usually you have to reach out to fertility clinic and schedule kind of that first consultation appointment. I don't know, maybe some clinics do that as already included in the price, but I think usually it's then really kind of based on the doctor's hourly rate, because that first appointment is really crucial to also do some tests, some investigations to make sure, you are a good candidate for IVF if that's what you're looking for, or that you are a good candidate for a egg freezing journey. So that really just want to, from my also financial standpoint, because I think that's so important to also always talk about here. Just be prepared that that very first consultation appointment will always be charged extra and separate from the entire IVF package that is to follow. Most clinics, and I've been, I think, to 3 different ones as we were kind of comparing or trying to find the one that is right for you. They will all ask you to come in a couple of days, usually before your first consultation appointment, to give some blood and usually also urine. Because with that, basically, what they're trying to do is, before you already meet with your doctor for the first time, just to run some analysis and tests. So you can actually already discuss this with your doctor at your appointment, which I found quite nice because, again, thinking about getting the most for your money, it would really be annoying if you were to come in, just talk and be like, okay, we need to check your AMH levels, and then you would have to come again, be charged again to discuss these results. So I kind of like that normally the way fertility clinics operate is that kind of you give all this blood and urine and everything they need before your first appointment so they can actually already chat to you about your results and already basically at that first appointment determine are you a good candidate for, let's say, IVF or not. And then really the reason why they're taking your blood is because they want to run kind of a basic panel of your hormones. Here again, it's really different for everyone, right? Really individual, really personal, so based on kind of what you're trying to investigate and find out. If, let's say, maybe you have a complicated case of unexplained infertility, or, kind of you want to understand what is happening, you're not really ready yet to proceed with IVF, they might be running way, way, way more blood levels on you. The ones that I really want to go into is based, again, on my experience with kind of already knowing that I want to go in that IVF route. So for me, they measured the AMH, the anti-Müllerian hormone. I spoke a lot about it before in my previous episodes, but that's really that hormone that gives you this indication, right, of your ovarian reserve, of this savings account. So basically an indication of all the eggs that you have left. And the other one that they measure is the FSH, which is the follicle stimulating hormone, which is another really important hormone that kind of helps one egg mature usually before your ovulation. And it's just also a really important marker for them to for your overall fertility snapshot. Because, for instance, if these levels are off, they already know you're premenopausal, you might be running really low on your eggs. You might have, I think it's called diminished egg reserve. So these two are really, really important indicators just for kind of your fertility snapshot. They will also likely check your LH, so your luteinizing hormone and your estrogen levels. Again, both of them are important indicators also for your doctor about how your body currently works. Right, in previous episodes, I had discussed that luteinizing hormone is what increases right before your ovulation. For instance, ovulation sticks are able to pick up if you use them, if you're trying to get pregnant. So again, just really important for your doctor to look at those levels, because later when they do give you the medication, these are the levels that will also always be monitored to see how your body is responding to the medication. So that very first blood analysis is just really important to almost see it as like a base level of that's how, let's call it, efficient your body is working at the moment. And that's kind of what your base level is for all these different hormone values. Because I think while textbook-wise, of course, there are certain ranges, it's really important that your clinic, takes this personalized, customized approach and actually looks at like what is normal for you. Because then, based on that, they can adjust the medication. Some clinics, and that again depends on your situation, will look at things like your thyroid levels, your progesterone, maybe your testosterone. I spoke a bit about testosterone before, which was a crazy learning for me, that mine was, for instance, too low. So I had to supplement a little bit before even going into IVF, because also your testosterone levels need to be at an adequate level in order kind of for your body to be in an ideal stage to conceive. But yeah, so kind of all these basic hormone levels that your doctor just wants to see before you set out for the next steps. And really once they are able to discuss these results, they can also tell you okay, you are a good candidate for, let's say, IVF or egg freezing, or maybe, there's some other things, some other medications, some other treatments that you need to do before you can go into it. Also, as I said, they will likely take your urine. I think that's also an important one because they check for kind of any infections or any other underlying diseases you might have. And then when you come to that appointment, usually one thing that they also will always do is an internal ultrasound to look at that antral follicle count that I've talked about also in previous episodes, which is really that short term, right? Kind of that checking account, as my doctor referred to it, that gives a snapshot of kind of how many follicles do you have every month. And that's also really important because that can give your doctor already the first indication about how, let's say, successful your IVF or your egg freezing process might be. Because let's say if they see 18 follicles, they can already say okay, we'll hope to get, let's say, 15 eggs. Because with all the medication, we'll try to get all of them, or as many of them to grow. So really important that also there and then at that appointment, they will do that ultrasound. And another important thing to consider is that some clinics, if not all clinics, also offer a sperm analysis, which is also a really important part of that overall fertility outlook, of that overall kind of fertility profile that they really want to have of you. Of course, not relevant for someone who is maybe single and just doing egg freezing, but especially if as a couple you come to the clinic, really important to consider because as with so many things, I think we women oftentimes, and especially with fertility, kind of think it must be us. But actually, I looked at the data again, it's in 40 to 50% of all infertility cases, it's based on kind of that male factor infertility. So just important to kind of know that there's also the second piece of the puzzle that your partner might be asked to give a sperm sample. And that one is actually also a really important component because they will analyze the things like the sperm count, the motility, the morphology. And those are just super important things so that your clinic can then advise you if you should go the IVF or the ICSI route. And that brings me to my second thing around what even is IVF or ICSI. You might have heard of IVF before, but ICSI, I think the term people aren't as familiar with. But essentially, these are just two different methods of doing fertility treatments or of basically having this in vitro fertilization. IVF, as mentioned before, means in vitro fertilization. So you basically put one egg and one sperm in a petri dish and you let them kind of naturally find each other, right? So hopefully they find each other and they fertilize. And even, maybe I should clarify, it's not even that you just put one egg and one sperm, but basically you put a bunch of eggs and a bunch of sperm together, and then you kind of let them all find each other. So kind of almost naturally let them figure out who is the best match here. With ICSI, and I need to read that, that's intracytoplasmic sperm injection. That's a process where really a single sperm is injected into one single egg. So just a different kind of process, I guess a little bit more hands-on from the clinician. at the lab, because they have to essentially pick like the perfect ripe egg and the perfect sperm to combine them together. And of course, do kind of a bit of investigation up front to figure out like, okay, which two will be the most compatible. Both have advantages and disadvantages. The way it was explained to us is that really those sperm results that I was just mentioning are a big indicator for which route a couple should pick. So let's say if there are maybe some issues with the sperm, maybe it's not moving as it should be, or maybe there's a low sperm count, then ICSI is usually recommended, because then the doctor can really pick the right, kind of the best looking sperm and inject it into the egg. In our case, we actually did a 50% split. So 50% of all eggs with IVF and 50% with ICSI, because we didn't have any particular issues on either side. And with that, our doctor just explained that we would maximize the chances, because while with ICSI, of course, it is a bit more controlled. And I think maybe even, I don't remember the numbers, but I think percentage-wise, maybe it's even a little bit higher that the egg will fertilize, because, the clinician picks exactly the ripe egg and the right sperm. The thing that, or the reason that they do like to split it if they can, is that with IVF, or kind of letting them naturally select each other, you just give a chance to all of the kind of egg to get fertilized. Because even if under the microscope an egg might not look perfectly ripe, they still might be able to kind of find that sperm that is perfect for it and still fertilize. So you just kind of maximize your chances. And in our case, since we started IVF after, after succeeding at becoming naturally pregnant, unfortunately ended in a miscarriage, but still for a fertility clinic, that's just really important information, because they know, okay, naturally, your body, despite, having a miscarriage, was still able to do it. So that's just a super important indicator that they know, okay, you actually also have chances that with like that IVF method, your eggs will be able to fertilize. So that's kind of why they like to do the 50% approach, to give you the optimal chances of fertilizing eggs. And then, once you kind of decide on which route to go, are you doing mixed or are you doing it together? Then I guess the next thing that you will be asking yourself is, when does the stimulation cycle kick off, right? And like, how does my medicine schedule look like? It depends on kind of your clinic. Not always will they already go into this at your first appointment. They might, depending on how much time they have. They might go into these details at your second appointment, but just still wanted to give you all of this up front. So usually they will have done all these tests that I mentioned, and then you decided that you want to proceed. So to kind of understand when you're starting, some clinics, they will want you to start taking the contraceptive pill, which might sound super counterintuitive. I remember when I read about that for the first time, I was like, why would I be taking the pill now if I'm actually, I want to get pregnant? But some clinics, I think especially in the US, do that because it just allows them to kind of take over control with those hormones over your body, to also regulate how all these follicles are growing. So almost to get all these follicles to the same size if possible. And that then again will help with kind of the medication to hopefully let them all then grow at the same rate. My clinic does not do it. From my knowledge, in Europe, clinics don't really do it anymore. But again, it depends where you are, right? Like what your clinic does. So my clinic did not start with a pill because they felt kind of confident that they can control that growth almost like manually, right? By just monitoring me a lot and then adjusting the medication if need be. In terms of start time, usually they will have to wait for your next period to start. So just something also to be aware of in terms of expectations, that it's not like you go in and you're like, okay, I asked all my questions, I'm ready to do this, let's go. They will usually tell you like, okay, call us when your period starts. Or it might be, depending when you're on your cycle, 3 weeks, 2 weeks. So just want to help you manage your expectations that it will, again, then take a little bit until you can actually start. Then when your period does start, you then usually call your clinic. And again, depending on the protocol that you're doing, and when I say protocol, that's kind of the medicine schedule that they give you. They are referred to as protocols. You then start with the medication either on the first day of your period or a couple of days after, but the doctor will always advise you exactly how to do it. And then the length of the cycle, or like the length of stimulation, will also really depend on how your follicles are growing. So that's kind of what I was saying about all these monitoring appointments. They will have to just really see how everything is progressing. I know about some cases where then women just had to take the shots for about a week or 10 days. I think in my case, it was almost 2 weeks. So it's just really different. But I think from everything that I've read, it's about like between a week to 2 weeks. And then when it comes to the shots, I think that is probably the biggest fear, the biggest question, right? The biggest, maybe even like misconceptions that are out there, because you might be asking yourself like, how often then do I have to administer all these shots? Here, it's really important to keep in mind, and I think to first of all also understand why you're even giving yourself these shots, like what even is the purpose of them. In the questions that I put in the PDF that you can download, you will see that I also have the question about like, please explain to me exactly like what medicine is in these shots, what is the purpose of it, and also demonstrate and show me exactly how I need to administer them. I think it's just super, super important that your clinic takes you through it step by step, because for me personally, and maybe that depends a bit, like kind of if you are a visual learner, or, you know, like how it helps for you to rationalize things. But for me personally, it just also really helped with giving all these shots to just fully understand like, okay, this medicine that I'm injecting myself will do X, Y, Z. So essentially, at least from my experience, what I can explain to you is that what you're doing with this medicine is a combination of stimulating, right? So you're kind of stimulating the hormones that your body already naturally has to grow more than one egg. So as we discussed previously, right, in kind of your natural cycle, when your luteinizing hormone is increasing, it increases to a certain rate that allows from all these follicles for one egg to mature and then be released for ovulation. And here, essentially, they're giving you kind of a synthetic form of both the luteinizing hormone and also the FSH, the follicle stimulating hormone, to get all of these follicles to grow. And then the second medication that you will have to start taking further down the line, usually around kind of after a week of giving only the stimulation shots, it's a medication to kind of block ovulation, because that is the biggest kind of stop and go that they have to accomplish to really be like, let's push it. Like, I almost envision it as like a little like enforcer, right? To let all these eggs grow, all these follicles grow with the FSH, with the LH. And then after a few days, when they kind of see, okay, they're growing well, they have to give you this other medication to be like, okay, grow, but don't grow too much or too quickly, because they don't want, ovulation to occur, and they don't want to lose any of these eggs preemptively, because they want to be able to retrieve all of them in the egg retrieval surgery. Another really important thing that you have to keep in mind is also I think it's a really rare but serious complication called OHSS, which is ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. And that's kind of the number one thing that the clinics and doctors are watching out for. So essentially what that is if your body reacts in a quite aggressive maybe way to all this medication and kind of goes into overdrive, and the, kind of your hormone levels rise too much, then literally your body can go into kind of this overstimulated phase, and it can lead to a lot of swelling and even like loose fluid in your abdomen. So it's quite serious. I think it is super rare that it happens, but just something to keep in mind, especially if you have quite a few follicles. So for me, I did have quite a few follicles, so that was something I was concerned about. But that was kind of, again, the reason why my doctor just monitored me super closely, just to make sure that if needed, that the medication doses can actually be dialed down. I did also actually want to show you the actual medication, because I still had it lying around here. And I thought, again, I'm a visual learner, so maybe you are too. Maybe you're watching this on video, so it might be helpful. So ignore the brands, it doesn't matter, right? Like your clinic might give you a different one, but just to kind of for you to see how it looks like. So this is one medication. It's like a little pen. I don't have the medication in there now because I don't have the medication anymore, but essentially you put that medication in, and then you put the needle on, and the needle is super, super thin. So you can see it here. I don't know how well you can see it, but just wanted to demonstrate to you like how thin it actually is, because I think that's another misconception that the needles are super thick, and yes, they hurt. And I'm going to go into that also at the end, kind of my tips to manage that physical and pain aspect, but they are super, super thin. So that's like one kind of medication that I had to do daily. I think that was the FSH, kind of like a synthetic FSH form to increase that follicle growth or to stimulate the follicle growth, and just like it kind of looked quite nicely like a pen. You just like press it here and then you give it to yourself. Another type of medication that they might give to you is a combination of FSH and LH. So those two hormones that are there to stimulate the growth of the follicles. This one that I had to take, because it had both hormones, it came in like two different vials, and you can see like one of them was a liquid and one of them was like a little powder. This one you had to kind of mix yourself, so you would have to kind of break this, and I'm not going to demonstrate it now, I don't want to open it, but you had to break this little fluid and use a syringe and then put it in this powder solution and then kind of prepare a little syringe to administer to yourself. Here also I can show you the needle. It's very, very thin. So usually they give you like a thick needle to do all the mixing and it looks scary, but that thin needle, as you can see, like it's really, really thin, is then what you use to administer yourself the shot. So hopefully that helps a little bit with any fear of needles to actually understand like how thin they are. Later on, when you kind of complete this cycle, and normally it's like, let's say 10 days maybe, where they monitor you, depending again on your situation about how your follicles grow, you will be asked to add another shot to avoid ovulation from happening. So as I was saying, that's kind of that pulling back mechanism. That's just kind of a different medication to kind of block and hem ovulation from happening. That one maybe depends on the brand, but remember it burning a bit. So stick to the end where I'll talk a bit about tips that help with that. And then lastly, the fourth shot, and sorry to disappoint you if you thought it's just got to be 2 or 3. Like usually at the end, there's another shot you have to add, but that's really just the night before your egg retrieval. So once you get the go ahead, right, and then they see like, okay, all your follicles are at an adequate level, we are ready to proceed with the egg retrieval, they will give you another shot. And usually that's another type of medication. Sometimes it's something like HCG. So just kind of, they call it a trigger shot. So just that kind of another, you can imagine it as like a booster dosage to give your eggs that final stimulation to get them to like the optimal size to prepare them for egg retrieval. And usually it's 2 trigger shots, and your doctor will give you kind of an exact timing to the minute when you have to do them. It's super important to stick to that timing, because everything is kind of, the success of your egg retrieval is really based on that. Because let's say if your egg retrieval surgery is at 10 a.m. in the morning, they will tell you exactly like, okay, you need to do the first trigger shot at exactly 10 p.m. the previous night, and then the second one exactly at 11 p.m. the previous night. And I remember like really standing there, looking at the clock, having my shot already out, prepared, just being ready to go, because it is just super, super important to do that exactly at that time. And then lastly, just so you understand like that monitoring, because I talked a lot about it, like how does that work? How does that look like? Just so you're prepared. As I mentioned, like there is a lot of monitoring, usually not quite as much in that first few days of stimulation, because first they just need to get things going and give your body a chance to adapt to it. But then from about like day 5, day 6, at least my clinic wanted me to come in every, I think in the beginning 3 and then later every 2 days. And at every appointment that you come in, just so you're prepared, you will have to do an internal ultrasound. So I know these might be uncomfortable, you might hate them, but just if you go and if you sign up for this IVF or ICSI or egg freezing process, just so you are prepared to become comfortable with them, because there have to be so many, unfortunately. But, I kind of found it okay that there were so many, because better, you feel monitored, and especially if you're concerned about things like OHSS, I just found it a bit reassuring that they're keeping such a close eye on it. And I mean, the physical discomfort goes away quite quickly. So every time they will do an internal ultrasound, Actually, on the ultrasound, they can then measure every single follicle. So they will count every single time, okay, how many are there? How are they growing? They will measure all of them. It's like incredible what they can do these days, right, to look so in detail. But that just will be super important because the follicles need to reach a certain size before kind of you're ready for the echo chamber procedure. Also, at every single appointment, they will also take your blood, which is also important just to be prepared of. As I mentioned in my last episode, I was crazy bruised on both arms. I have super small veins, so it was probably more uncomfortable than the actual ultrasounds. But that's just such an important part of the monitoring because they have to see, and that kind of goes back to what I talked about in the beginning, that baseline, right, of your hormones, that baseline of your LH, of your progesterone, of your estrogen. It's just really important to compare that to then how your hormone levels are changing based on the medication that you're administering to yourself. So every single time you'll have to also leave some blood. That's really kind of the two things that they will measure at every single appointment. And then based on that, the closer you come, or like let's say after a week, after 10 days, they will then really be able to tell you, okay, most likely your egg retrieval will be on this day. And then kind of the more time progresses, then they'll be able to really schedule it so you know exactly when it's happening. Before coming to an end, I just want to give you a couple of key tips that I just found super helpful, or kind of that I started doing as I was going through all of this, now that you're kind of prepared about what's happening and kind of the step-by-step process when you go into it. So when you do the shots, the first tip is really about integrating it into your day-to-day life, because I think it would be kind of naive to think that life stops for those 10, 14 days. It doesn't, right? I mean, maybe, you have the option to take fully off from work, or I don't know, do it in a way that you can totally relax around it and just do your shots. But probably for most of the people, you have to integrate it into your day-to-day and into your life. And I know that can be quite stressful. So just like an important thing or like just an important tip for you, that it is absolutely possible to integrate it into your life. As I mentioned in my last episode, I did the shots like on planes and lounges and restaurant bathrooms, like absolutely possible. Don't be afraid of it. It just requires a little bit of preparation. So one thing that I encourage, because some shots you will have to take in the morning, some shots maybe at night, later on maybe that changes. So if let's say you have shots that you have to do in the morning, I would just advise that you really integrate them into your morning routine, right? So you don't forget about them. So let's say if every morning you pour yourself a glass of water the first thing you get up, or get yourself a glass of orange juice, just so you already have the shot kind of there. So you see it and that you do it. And then it just kind of becomes this part of your regular routine. I think calendar reminders are also just really easy ways to keep yourself accountable. And especially if you're doing this with a partner, I would just really suggest you kind of have it in a shared calendar mode, just kind of, but both of you have this reminder so you can, again, help each other to really make sure that you stay on track. And I was really concerned about kind of that you have to do them exactly at the same time every single day. My doctor advised that it's not actually necessary to do them, let's say, exactly at 8 a.m. every single day. It is super important for that last trigger shot, as I said, but the others, he said, it doesn't really matter if you do it at 8 a.m. or 8 or 10, right? So that was kind of helpful to just remove that stress. And then, if you do kind of go out and like, okay, for your evening shot, you won't be home, so you can't integrate it into, like, let's say, your regular routine, I would just recommend to prepare it all kind of in advance, to have it in maybe like a little Ziploc baggie where you put all your shots. I do suggest also you take a second Ziploc baggie, because as you see in like all these sharp things, you can't just throw them in the restroom bathroom. You have to put them in like a special sharps container that your doctor will give you, which will become really full and crowded from all the shots. But just recommend to kind of have one baggie with all your medication, and then a second baggie where you can put all the empty shots, kind of the used shots, so you can then quickly, when you're home, put that in your sharps container. So it just kind of helps to keep things organized. And talking about organization, I mean, you might already have noticed that I am a bit of an organization freak. I talk also a lot about this in my 5 key learnings from my IVF journey. But I just found it super helpful just to, have everything out visible, arrange everything maybe nicely in a basket, because when you receive the medicine, maybe your doctor hands it to you, or maybe it's delivered, it's like a huge box with so many different vials and stuff and syringes. And so for me, especially because, as you saw, like some medication requires, that you have to build it together. So like this one had then the medicine and then had the needles, right? So it's kind of 3 different parts for a medication, and the other one had like this liquid one, this powder, the syringe, a mixing needle, this needle. So it just can be quite confusing. So I just found it really helpful just to organize it all kind of by medicine, so it's clear like what you need for each, or maybe also print a PDF with all your medicine schedules, so you can just go step by step, tick off whatever medication you just did. Again, just help me kind of stay organized with everything. And of course, especially if you travel, really important that you kind of, prepare everything, put everything maybe in a pouch, just so you make sure that you don't forget anything, because that's the last thing that you want, right? To maybe not be home and then not have access to your medication. And then the last thing, really my tip around helping manage that physical discomfort of doing the shots and help manage the bruising. I did not bruise too terribly, I have to say, even though I have super, super sensitive skin. So maybe that will give you some positive hope if you also have sensitive skin. It was actually okay because, as I said, the needles are super thin. But again, I can't promise that you won't, because it just so depends on your skin type. What helps is cooling. So I also brought to show you, I have like this little cooling pouch that I got off Amazon. You just fill water and put it in the ice thingy. And I just like that it's kind of like it's adjustable, so you can just pop it against your stomach. It just helps a lot to either cool it before, so the area is already quite numb, and then of course also after you administer the shot, to cool it after, just to kind of let any bruising, any swelling go down. Some medication, and if I remember correctly, I think it was the medication that you have to give yourself to kind of stop that ovulation from happening. It burns quite a bit, so with that also the cooling after really, really helped. And also with kind of in terms of area, I mean, they advise you to give it to you either kind of in your stomach, so you really have to like pinch your fat there and then put it there in kind of your lower abdomen, or you can also put it in your thigh, like your upper leg, whatever works for you. So I do kind of recommend you just find a spot that feels more or less comfortable, or maybe the least uncomfortable for you. And just here also really important, in addition to the cooling, try not to put the needle in the same spot every single time. So especially like, let's say these 2 shots that I showed you, I had to always do together. So I would always do like one on the right, one on the left. And then if I had to do another one in the evening, I would do that in like a different spot. So just try to give you kind of those spots some time to heal, because that might also help with any bruising. That is it for this week's episode. I hope you found it helpful. I know it's a lot of information, but again, I just hope that it was helpful to be a little bit more prepared as you go into your first appointment, feel maybe a little less scared. Hopefully seeing those needles, if you watch it on video, helped to understand that it's not as bad as it might seem. I think often we kind of build things up in our head, so it sometimes helps to just, kind of visualize it and know that it's going to be okay, that it's all not too bad. It's hard, but we got this. We definitely can, get through this, and always think about the silver lining, about your end goal, and know that you're not alone. I think that's just so important. Like, know that you're one of many, that many are going through this, and if we all, share it, stick together, help each other, I think it makes it just so much easier. So thank you so much for listening. Again, reminder, if you want to download a little PDF for free that I have put together with those key questions that you can ask your clinic at your first appointment, it's linked below. If you did like the episode, I absolutely appreciate if you leave a like or a comment, a review, or subscribe if you're on YouTube. And I look forward to seeing you next time.